The video appeared on a Tuesday morning in late May 2012, uploaded to a gore website with a title that promised unspeakable horrors. Within hours, it had been viewed thousands of times, each click adding to a digital trail of witnesses to an act so disturbing that even seasoned internet users recoiled in shock. The footage, grainy and deliberately theatrical, showed the methodical murder of a young man tied to a bed frame. The killer's face remained hidden, but his movements were precise, calculated, almost performative in their cruelty. What made this video particularly chilling was not just its content, but its composition. This was not a crime of passion captured accidentally on camera. Every angle seemed considered, every moment staged for maximum psychological impact. The killer had positioned himself as both perpetrator and director, crafting a nightmare specifically designed for digital consumption. The background music, a haunting classical piece, added in surreal quality that transformed murder into macabre theater. As word spread across internet forums and social media platforms, a collective horror gripped online communities. Users who had stumbled upon the video described sleepless nights and an inability to shake the images from their minds. But alongside the revulsion came something else, an obsessive need to understand. Who could commit such an act and document it so meticulously? The killer had not just murdered a human being, he had weaponized the internet itself, turning it into an unwilling accomplice in his crime. The video's technical quality suggested someone comfortable with filming and editing. The killer understood lighting, camera angles, and post-production techniques. This was not amateur footage, but a carefully crafted piece of digital horror. Law enforcement agencies across multiple countries began receiving reports about the video, each viewing adding pressure to identify the perpetrator before he could strike again. Within the first week, internet sleuths had begun dissecting every frame, searching for clues that might reveal the killer's identity or location. They analyzed shadows, furniture, architectural details, and even the quality of the video equipment used. What they discovered was a killer who seemed to anticipate their investigation, someone who had carefully considered how his crime would be consumed and analyzed by digital audiences. The most disturbing aspect was the killer's apparent enjoyment of the attention. As the video spread and investigations intensified, new posts appeared on various platforms, taunting law enforcement and promising more violence to come. The internet had given birth to a new kind of predator, one who fed not just on the act of killing, but on the global audience's horrified fascination with his work. The online response to the video was unprecedented in its scope and coordination. Within days of its initial posting, dozens of internet forums had dedicated entire threads to analyzing every second of footage. Users with backgrounds in forensics, law enforcement, and digital investigation volunteered their expertise, creating an impromptu army of digital detectives. United by their determination to identify the killer, the investigation took on the characteristics of a complex puzzle, with each forum contributor focusing on different aspects of the evidence. Some analyzed the apartment's layout and furnishings, comparing them to rental listings and architectural databases. Others enhanced audio tracks, searching for background sounds that might indicate location. The killer's hands, visible throughout the video, were photographed and analyzed for distinguishing marks, scars, or jewelry. What made this crowdsourced investigation particularly effective was the collaborative nature of the analysis. Users would post enhanced screenshots, share their findings, and build upon each other's discoveries. Geographic location specialists identified potential cities based on visible electrical outlets and building construction styles. Audio experts isolated and amplified background noises, identifying everything from traffic patterns to HVAC systems that might narrow down the location. But the killer was watching their efforts with apparent amusement. New posts began appearing on various platforms, clearly authored by the perpetrator himself. These messages taunted the investigators, praised their analytical skills, and promised that more violence was coming. The killer seemed to relish the attention, treating the investigation as a game where he held all the cards. The psychological warfare intensified as the killer began leaving deliberate clues in his online communications, references to specific movies, philosophical quotes, and cultural touchstones created a breadcrumb trail that investigators followed obsessively. Each clue led to more questions, and the killer seemed to anticipate their every analytical move. He was not just evading capture. He was orchestrating his own manhunt like a twisted form of entertainment. Law enforcement agencies initially struggled to coordinate with the decentralized online investigation. Traditional investigative methods moved too slowly compared to the real-time analysis happening in internet forums. However, some officers began monitoring these communities, recognizing that the collective intelligence of thousands of motivated individuals might succeed where conventional police work had stalled. The killer's digital presence became increasingly bold as media attention grew. He seemed energized by the global focus on his crime, treating the investigation as validation of his importance. His online posts grew more frequent and more detailed, providing just enough information to maintain interest while carefully avoiding anything that might immediately lead to his capture. The breakthrough came when internet investigators identified distinctive furniture pieces visible in the murder video. Cross-referencing these items with online sales platforms and rental listings, they narrowed their focus to specific neighborhoods in Montreal. But more importantly, they discovered that the killer had been active online for years, carefully constructing a digital persona designed to maximize attention and create an illusion of glamour. The name Luca Rocco Magnotta emerged from this digital archaeology, attached to dozens of social media profiles, modeling websites, and personal blogs. Each profile painted a picture of someone desperately seeking fame and validation, someone who had spent years trying to manufacture celebrity through increasingly desperate means. The photographs showed a young man who had undergone multiple cosmetic surgeries, each procedure designed to create an image of perfection that existed primarily in the digital realm. Magnotta's online presence revealed a complex web of fabricated stories, fake relationships, and manufactured controversies. He had created false Wikipedia pages about himself, posted fake news articles describing his supposed modeling career, and even generated artificial rumors about romantic relationships with celebrities. The digital persona was elaborate and meticulously maintained, suggesting someone who understood the mechanics of online attention and viral content. What became clear through this investigation was that Magnotta had been practicing for years, using the internet as a laboratory for attention-seeking behavior. He had created multiple personas across different platforms, testing which types of content generated the most engagement. The murder video was not an isolated incident, but the culmination of a long-term strategy to achieve notoriety through increasingly extreme acts. His social media history revealed an obsession with celebrity culture and media attention that bordered on delusional. Magnotta had convinced himself that he was destined for fame, and when traditional paths to celebrity proved unsuccessful, he had begun exploring darker alternatives. The internet provided both the tools and the audience for his escalating need for attention. The sophistication of his digital manipulation was impressive and disturbing. Magnotta had learned to game algorithms, manipulate search results, and create artificial buzz around his persona. He employed techniques typically used by professional marketers and social media managers, but directed these skills toward creating a fictional version of himself that existed primarily online. Investigators discovered that Magnotta's digital identity had become more real to him than his actual life. He spent hours daily maintaining his online presence, responding to comments, creating new content, and monitoring his digital reputation. The boundary between his authentic self and his manufactured persona had dissolved completely, leaving someone who existed primarily as a curated digital performance. Long before the murder that would make him internationally notorious, Luca Magnotta had been honing his skills as a digital predator through acts of animal cruelty that he filmed and distributed online. These earlier videos served as both practice runs and psychological preparation for the escalation to human violence that would follow. The animal cruelty videos revealed a methodical approach to inflicting suffering that was deeply disturbing in its calculated nature. Magnotta did not kill impulsively. He planned each act with the same attention to staging and presentation that would later characterize his human victims' murder. The animals were props in his twisted performance, their suffering secondary to his need for digital attention and the psychological gratification he derived from viewer reactions. These videos generated significant outrage in online communities dedicated to animal welfare, but they also provided Magnotta with exactly the type of attention he craved. He monitored the responses obsessively, studying which aspects of his crimes generated the strongest reactions. The negative attention was still attention, and it fed his growing confidence that he could control and manipulate large audiences through acts of violence. What made these early crimes particularly chilling was Magnotta's apparent indifference to the actual suffering he was causing. His focus remained entirely on the digital performance, the camera angles, the dramatic staging, the post-production editing that would maximize the psychological impact on viewers. The animals were merely raw material for his ongoing experiment in manufactured notoriety. Animal rights activists began tracking Magnotta's online presence, trying to identify him and report his crimes to authorities. But he seemed to view their efforts as another form of engagement, proof that his strategy of using violence to generate attention was working. Each investigation attempt validated his sense of importance and confirmed his belief that he was becoming a significant figure in digital culture. The technical quality of these videos improved over time, suggesting that Magnotta was treating his crimes as a learning experience. He experimented with different filming techniques, lighting setups, and editing styles. The violence was becoming more professional, more polished, and more deliberately crafted for maximum psychological impact on digital audiences. Law enforcement agencies in multiple countries received reports about these videos, but the international nature of internet distribution made prosecution difficult. Magnotta seemed aware of these jurisdictional challenges and exploited them, posting his content on platforms hosted in countries with different legal frameworks and enforcement capabilities. The progression from animal cruelty to human murder was not a sudden escalation, but a gradual process of desensitization and skill development. Each video built upon the previous one, pushing boundaries while testing his ability to evade consequences. The internet provided both the distribution platform and the audience feedback that enabled this evolution toward ultimate violence. Eric Clinton Kirk Newman had transformed himself into Luca Rocco Magnotta through a process of systematic self-reinvention that involved legal name changes, extensive cosmetic surgery, and the complete fabrication of a personal history designed to support his delusions of grandeur. This transformation was not merely cosmetic, but represented a fundamental rejection of his authentic identity in favor of a carefully constructed fictional persona. The original Eric Newman had grown up in a troubled household, experiencing psychological instability and social isolation that left him desperate for attention and validation. Rather than addressing these underlying issues through conventional means, he had chosen to literally recreate himself, using surgical procedures and legal documentation to support an elaborate fantasy about who he wanted to become. Magnotta's cosmetic surgeries were extensive and expensive, suggesting both significant financial investment and a deep dissatisfaction with his natural appearance. He had undergone multiple procedures designed to create features that would photograph well and generate positive attention online. Each surgery was documented and celebrated on his social media platforms, treating his physical transformation as a form of public performance. The name change from Newman to Magnotta was accompanied by elaborate backstories about his supposed heritage and family connections. He created fictional narratives about his childhood, his education, and his career aspiration, each story designed to make him appear more interesting and exotic than his actual background would suggest. These fabrications were maintained consistently across multiple platforms and interactions. His psychological instability manifested in increasingly grandiose delusions about his importance and destiny. Magnotta had convinced himself that he was meant for fame and that traditional paths to celebrity were beneath him or inadequately suited to his unique talents. The sense of entitlement grew over time, eventually encompassing the belief that he deserved attention regardless of the methods required to obtain it. The manufactured identity became a prison of its own creation. Maintaining the elaborate fiction required constant vigilance and increasingly sophisticated deception. Magnotta had to remember multiple versions of his personal history, keep track of his various online personas, and continuously create new content to support his fabricated image. Friends and acquaintances who knew him during this period described someone who seemed disconnected from reality, living primarily within the digital world he had created around his false identity. The boundary between his online persona and his actual personality had dissolved completely, leaving someone who existed primarily as a curated performance designed for digital consumption. The psychological pressure of maintaining this elaborate deception may have contributed to his eventual escalation to murder. When his manufactured fame failed to materialize through conventional means, violence became the logical next step in his quest for notoriety. The murder was not an aberration, but the inevitable culmination of years of escalating attention-seeking behavior. Zheng Lin was a 26-year-old international student from China, studying engineering at Concordia University in Montreal. He was described by friends as kind, intelligent, and optimistic about his future in Canada. His path crossed with Luca Magnotta's through online dating platforms, where Magnotta was actively seeking victims for what he had already planned as his most ambitious and horrific performance yet. The murder was not a crime of passion, but a meticulously planned production, designed to achieve maximum psychological impact and media attention. Magnotta had spent weeks preparing his apartment as a set, arranging lighting and camera equipment to ensure optimal documentation of the violence he intended to commit. Every aspect of the crime was choreographed in advance, from the initial filming setup to the disposal of evidence. Zheng Lin's murder was particularly horrific not just because of the violence itself, but because of the calculated way it was staged and documented. Magnotta treated his victim as a prop in an elaborate performance designed for digital distribution. The classical music playing in the background, the deliberate camera angles, and the methodical pacing of the violence all suggested someone who had rehearsed the scenario repeatedly in his mind. The crime scene revealed the extent of Magnotta's preparation and his complete disconnection from the humanity of his victim. He had transformed his apartment into a studio specifically designed for filming extreme violence. The technical quality of the resulting video demonstrated both his experience with previous crimes and his commitment to creating content that would generate maximum attention online. After the murder, Magnotta's behavior became even more disturbing as he treated Zheng Lin's body as raw material for continued performance. He dismembered the corpse, mailed body parts to political offices and elementary schools, and documented these actions with the same theatrical sensibility that had characterized the original murder. Each act was designed to maximize shock value and media coverage. The international nature of the victim, a Chinese student studying in Canada, added diplomatic complications that Magnotta seemed to have anticipated and exploited. The crime would generate attention not just locally but globally, involving multiple governments and international media outlets in ways that amplified his desired notoriety. Law enforcement agencies recognized immediately that they were dealing with someone who had planned the crime specifically for maximum media impact. The elaborate staging, the professional quality documentation, and the calculated distribution of evidence all suggested a perpetrator who understood how to manipulate both traditional media and internet culture for personal gain. The murder represented the culmination of years of escalating attention-seeking behavior, but it also marked the beginning of Magnotta's downfall. By creating such elaborate documentation of his crime, he had provided law enforcement with unprecedented evidence of his guilt. His need for notoriety had finally exceeded his ability to evade consequences. The investigation into Zheng Lin's murder quickly evolved into an international manhunt that spanned multiple continents and involved law enforcement agencies from Canada, the United States, and Europe. Magnotta's digital trail, which he had carefully cultivated for years to generate attention, now became the very evidence that would lead to his capture. Within hours of discovering Zheng Lin's torso, Montreal police had identified Magnota as the primary suspect through witness testimony and surveillance footage from his apartment building, but he had already fled the country, beginning a journey across Europe that he documented through social media posts and internet cafe logins. Seemingly unable to resist continuing his performance even while being pursued by international law enforcement, the manhunt was complicated by Magnota's understanding of how to manipulate digital systems and media attention. He continued posting online during his flight, taunting investigators and providing just enough information to maintain media interest while avoiding immediate capture. His posts suggested someone who was enjoying the global attention his crime had generated, treating the investigation as validation of his importance. Internet communities that had been tracking Magnota since his animal cruelty videos now focused their collective intelligence on predicting his movements and identifying his location. These digital investigators often moved faster than official law enforcement, analyzing surveillance footage, tracking financial transactions, and monitoring social media for clues about his whereabouts. Magnota's European journey revealed both his desperation and his continued need for attention. He visited internet cafes in multiple cities, maintaining his online presence and monitoring media coverage of his crime. Hotel surveillance footage showed someone who appeared to be enjoying his newfound notoriety, treating his fugitive status as another form of performance art. The breakthrough came when internet investigators identified him in surveillance footage from a Berlin internet cafe. Working with German authorities, they tracked his movements through the city and identified the hotel where he was staying. The collaborative effort between online communities and official law enforcement demonstrated the power of crowdsourced investigation in the digital age. His capture at the cafe where he was reading news coverage of his own crime was almost anticlimactic after the elaborate international chase. Magnota appeared surprised that his digital trail had been so thoroughly analyzed and that his location had been identified so quickly. The very internet presence he had used to generate attention had become the tool of his downfall. The arrest footage showed someone who seemed disappointed that his performance was ending. Magnota had achieved the global notoriety he had always craved, but the reality of facing consequences for his actions appeared to come as a shock to someone who had spent years living primarily in a digital fantasy world where actions had no real-world consequences. The manhunt demonstrated how the internet had fundamentally changed both criminal behavior and law enforcement capabilities. Magnota had used digital tools to amplify his crimes and generate attention, but those same tools had created an unprecedented evidence trail that made his capture inevitable. Luca Magnota's trial became a global media spectacle that he had clearly anticipated and desired. His courtroom behavior suggested someone who continued to view the proceedings as another form of performance, an opportunity to maintain the attention that had motivated his crimes. He pleaded not guilty by reason of mental illness, but the extensive evidence of premeditation and careful planning contradicted claims of psychiatric incapacity. The prosecution's case was built largely on the digital evidence that Magnota himself had created through his years of online activity and his meticulous documentation of his crimes. The internet presence that he had cultivated to generate attention became the primary tool of his conviction. Every social media post, every uploaded video, and every digital communication had created an unprecedented record of his criminal planning and execution. In December 2014, Magnota was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, without possibility of parole for 25 years. The verdict was watched globally by the same internet communities that had participated in his identification and capture. His conviction represented a form of digital justice, where online investigators had played a crucial role in ensuring accountability for internet-enabled crimes. The case fundamentally changed how law enforcement agencies approach crimes involving digital documentation and online distribution. Magnota had demonstrated how the internet could be weaponized to amplify criminal acts and generate global attention. But his capture also showed how digital evidence trails could be used to ensure swift justice. The psychological analysis of Magnotta's behavior revealed disturbing insights into how social media and internet culture could enable and amplify narcissistic and antisocial tendencies. His case became a cautionary tale about the dangers of seeking validation through increasingly extreme online performances and the way digital platforms could reward attention-seeking behavior regardless of its moral implications. Junlin's family established a memorial fund in his honor, focusing on supporting international students and promoting cross-cultural understanding. Their dignity in the face of such horrific violence provided a counterpoint to Magnotta's attention-seeking behavior, demonstrating that meaningful legacy comes through positive contribution rather than destructive notoriety. The internet communities that had tracked Magnotta's crimes and contributed to his capture continued monitoring similar cases, applying lessons learned from this investigation to other crimes involving digital documentation and online distribution. They had demonstrated the power of collective intelligence in the digital age, while also revealing the dark potential of internet-enabled criminal behavior. Magnotta's legacy serves as a warning about the intersection of mental illness, social media culture, and the human capacity for evil. His case revealed how the internet's democratization of media production and distribution could enable individuals to amplify their most destructive impulses on a global scale, while also demonstrating that these same digital tools could be used to ensure justice and accountability. The case continues to influence discussions about online safety, digital forensics, and the responsibility of internet platforms in preventing the distribution of violent content. Magnotta achieved the notoriety he had always sought, but his story serves primarily as a cautionary tale about the dangers of pursuing fame through destruction and the ultimate futility of seeking meaning through causing harm to others.